We are now going to continue with our poetry toolbox, starting on slide 41 with rhyme. So rhyme happens when words have the same ending vowel and consonant sounds. And sometimes it's an exact rhyme, and sometimes it's what's called a slant rhyme. So first we're going to look at rhyme scheme, and that refers to the pattern of end rhyme in a stanza or poem. It's usually shown by assigning a different letter each time a new final sound appears. So you can see in my sample that the first two lines rhyme, so they are labeled with an A. The second set of couplets rhyme, and they're noted with a B. The third set of couplets rhymes, so it's labeled with a C, and then the final set of couplets matches the rhyme in the first couplet, so it is also labeled with A. End rhyme is when the rhyming words occur at the ends of lines of poetry. And my example is, whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. So you've got two rhymes at the end, thus called end rhyme. Internal rhyme is when the rhyme occurs within a line of poetry. And my example is, let's beat the heat. Beat and heat rhyme, and they're in the same line, so the rhyme is internal. Perfect rhyme is when the rhyming sounds are exactly the same sound. The spelling doesn't matter as long as the sounds are the same. This also can be end rhyme or internal rhyme, so it can occur in either location. Slant rhyme, also known as half rhyme, is when two words nearly rhyme. They have either the same vowel sound or consonant sound, but not both. So my examples are herd and hoard, and lake and fate. Moving on to key figurative language terms. Denotation is the strict dictionary or literal meanings of words. A puppy is a young dog. So it denotes the meaning of the word. Connotation refers to the implied, loaded meanings or associations of words. A puppy is cute, lovable, warm, etc. Connotation can be both positive or negative. So my example is from Langston Hughes, and it's called Harlem. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? So this is a connotation because it's a description of a dream, not a definition. If it were a definition, it would be a connotation or a denotation. Connotation, explanation, denotation, definition. Imagery refers to the author's attempt to create a mental picture in the mind of the reader. Imagery is achieved through careful description of sensory details. These can be sights, sounds, textures, and smells that permeate the world created by the author. Imagery is something that we use in writing, but it is very often used with poetry because you're trying to evoke emotion. Figures of speech comparisons. Two unlike things compared directly, implying several similar qualities, such as the river is a snake which coils on itself, is metaphor. Metaphor is like the simile, but does not include like or as. An implied metaphor is a type of metaphor that compares two unlike things without mentioning one of them. So a metaphor would be the moon is a balloon. An implied metaphor would be without a string, the moon drifts across the sky. So it's an implied metaphor because it doesn't say that it is something else. It doesn't mention one of the terms. An extended metaphor is when a comparison is made by describing something as something else over a series of lines. So it isn't just a single line metaphor. It extends across lines of a poem. In my example by Emily Dickinson, hope is the thing with feathers. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. So the entire poem is about hope. The entire poem is that hope is a thing with feathers, which is extended throughout the poem. A simile is two unlike things compared using like or as, implying only one similar quality, such as the man paced like a hungry lion. Also, along with like or as, if the word compare is used, like in Romeo and Juliet, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? That is also considered a simile. Personification is giving human qualities to inanimate objects or non-human creatures, such as the trees danced in the breeze. Apostrophe is probably a term that's new to you, and apostrophe is when you're addressing some abstract object as if it were animate or alive, such as, O world, tell me thy pain. Thus, it is a kind of personification. Allusion is referring metaphorically to persons, places, or things from history or previous literature with which the reader is expected to have enough familiarity to make extended associations, such as, the new kid is as mean as Grendel and twice as ugly, or he must think he's some kind of Superman. So the allusion is a reference made to Grendel and made to Superman in these examples. Moving on to symbolism, the use of one object to represent or suggest another object or an idea. In The Raven, typically ravens represent bad luck and even death. In Greek mythology, ravens are seen as messengers. Perhaps this is why the speaker believes that it has come with a message from Lenore in the poem The Raven. So the raven is symbolic, and it's an example of symbolism. Moving on to figures of speech, and these types of figures of speech are substitutions. We start with metonymy. Metonymy is substitution of one word for another closely related word, such as the pot's boiling or the White House announced. So the pot isn't actually boiling, it's the water inside the pot is boiling. So we're using metonymy when we say the pot's boiling. The White House didn't announce, the people in the White House made an announcement, but they use metonymy because we all understand that when it says the White House announced, that announcement came from the White House, and the term is metonymy. Synecdoche is substitution of part for the whole, such as all hands on deck. For example, I have 4 mouths to feed at home. Mouths is the parts of people, and people is the whole. So if you say I have 4 mouths to feed at home, it's an example of synecdoche. Synesthesia, substitution of one sensory response for another, or the concurrent stimulation of several senses, such as a blue note or cool green, or the blind man turned his face to feel the sun. So you're combining more than one sensory response, or you're replacing one. So for example, a blue note, a note is something that you listen to, but in this case, it's explained with a visual color, and that's what makes it synesthesia. Moving on to general figures of speech. Some of these you've seen before, some of these are going to be new. Hyperbole is saying more than is true, an over-exaggeration, such as he wore his fingers to the bone. Irony is saying the opposite to what is true, such as war is kind. And here is another Emily Dickinson example of irony. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell. They'd advertise, you know. How dreary to be somebody, how public like a frog, to tell one's name, the livelong June, to admiring bog. So you're saying you're somebody by saying you're nobody, which is ironic. Oxymoron is an antithesis, antithesis, break that down to figure out what that means. An antithesis which brings together two sharply contradictory terms, such as wise fool, little big man, eloquent silence, and loving hate. Probably one of the most recognized is jumbo shrimp. And here is an example from Romeo and Juliet. Love is heavy and light, bright and dark, hot and cold, sick and healthy, asleep and awake. It's everything except what it is. And you will discover as we read Romeo and Juliet that Shakespeare uses oxymoron frequently throughout this piece of writing. A paradox is a statement which, while seemingly contradictory or absurd, may actually be well-founded or true. A logic twist, such as everything I say is a lie. And the paradox examples, it comes from a poem called The Paradox of Our Age. We have bigger houses, but smaller families, more conveniences, but less time. We have more degrees, but less sense, more knowledge, but less judgments, more experts, but more problems, more medicines, but less healthiness. We've been all the way to the moon and back, but have trouble crossing the street to meet the new neighbor. We build more computers to hold more information, to produce more copies than ever, but have less communication. We have become long on quantity, but short on quality. These are times of fast foods, but slow digestion. Tall man, but short character. Steep profits, but shallow relationships. It is a time when there is much in the window, but nothing in the room. A pun is a play on words based on the similarity of sound between two words with different meanings, such as, she offered her honor, he honored her offer, and all night long he was on her and off her. And here we have a salad pun poem. We can have fun if you let us. Just tossing salad puns. I'll try not to wilt, for I'll try dressing these puns to your appetite. An understatement is intentionally minimizing, trivializing, or making worse. Understatement is the opposite of hyperbole, because hyperbole is to exaggerate and understatement is to minimize. And here we have a Shel Silverstein poem, The Homework Machine. The homework machine, oh, the homework machine. Most perfect contraption that's ever been seen. Just put in your homework, then drop in a dime. Snap on the switch, and in 10 seconds' time, your homework comes out, quick and clean as can be. Here it is, 9 plus 4, and the answer is 3. 3? Oh me. I guess it's not as perfect as I thought it would be. Litotes is a form of understatement where a positive statement is expressed by negating its opposite. Here are some common litotes examples. They do not seem the happiest couple around. The ice cream was not too bad. New York is not an ordinary city. Your comments on politics are not useless. You are not as young as you used to be. I cannot disagree with your point of view. And one thing you should include in your notes is that it always includes a negative word. And that concludes all of our terms for our poetry toolbox.